Elvis was more private about his relationships with women, but he was comfortable with his leading ladies. He wasn't extremely intimate with many women. In the 1960s, he was getting serious with Priscilla while also spending time with some of his co-stars. But overall, he didn't have serious relationships. He mostly looked for temporary companionship. However, things changed when he started filming a movie with Ann-Margret in 1963. Priscilla had graduated and could travel with him, but the women connected to his friends in Memphis usually stayed behind. Elvis and Ann-Margret quickly fell in love. They felt a strong connection, like an electric current between them. Elvis was a fun, happy, and nice young man. They shared many things in common, like motorcycles, music, privacy, family, faith, and staying up late. When President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, they were deeply saddened, not as famous people, but as ordinary citizens. Elvis even asked his friends to protect him, saying he didn't want a watered-down explanation on TV if something happened to him. He wanted them to take revenge if he was ever killed. Elvis repeated these instructions several times in the following years. Elvis had a relationship with Ann-Margret for about a year, but it ended because he had to be with Priscilla. Elvis wanted Priscilla to be a stay-at-home wife without a career. When a movie producer named Hal Wallace met Priscilla, he asked if she wanted to act, but Elvis said no and kept her away from his movie sets for the most part. Ann-Margret's career was starting when she met Elvis, and she didn't want to stop working to marry the most famous person in show business. But they remained good friends for the rest of Elvis's life. When Elvis came back from Germany after his military service, he asked some people to bring a lot of Dexedrine, a medicine, with them in their luggage. They managed to get it to the United States without getting caught. So Elvis could keep using this medicine secretly. Even though he didn't have to travel and perform as much in Hollywood, he still had problems with his movie schedules and sleeping. He didn't sleep much, only getting about 4 hours of sleep if he was lucky. He said he had a lot of energy and liked to be busy. When Elvis was making movies, he had to wake up very early, like 6 or 7 in the morning. In Hollywood, some people took special pills in the morning to wake up for work and other pills at night to sleep. Elvis used these pills too, but he always said he had a reason for it, like losing weight or being able to wake up early for work. His friend Jerry Schilling remembered that Elvis thought of these pills as helpful medicine. Elvis even had a big book about all kinds of pills and their uses, which he kept by his bed. He believed he could find answers to anything in that book. Elvis was really good at being a rock and roll star, and he also liked learning about medicine. He read books about it and kept up with new discoveries. He even thought about becoming a doctor once, but he didn't have the money to go to college. Priscilla, who knew him well, said that in the 1960s, Elvis already had some health problems that needed medicine to help with the pain. She started to wonder if he was taking too much medicine, even though she knew he had reasons to need it. When Elvis and his friends were young, they didn't think taking some medicines, which were also used as drugs, would hurt them. They used these medicines to have energy when they needed it and to sleep when they needed it. One of Elvis's friends, Lamar Fike, even admitted he had a problem with these medicines and would stay awake for days at a time. They all lived this way for several years. Elvis and his friends were around the same age and did similar things, but Elvis's life ended much sooner. Most of his friends lived into their 70s and 80s, but Elvis only lived to be 42. The reason might be that Elvis had some health problems that weren't obvious until the 1970s, when the stress of touring made them harder to hide. Elvis was very strong and tough around his friends. He didn't tell them about his health problems. He took medicine to hide his symptoms and kept going. In 1964, Jerry Schilling saw something different when Elvis had trouble walking downstairs at Graceland. Elvis was holding onto his father and had an oxygen mask on. Jerry was surprised because Elvis was known for being in great shape, and this was the first time he saw Elvis looking weak. Jerry thought it was a sign of the strain Elvis was under as a famous singer, even though it seemed like trouble with his health started later, around 1973 or 1974. Elvis just said it was because of the smog in California. Jerry didn't know that Dr. Clark, who took care of Gladys, had visited their house. Dr. Clark would come to see Elvis, his dad Vernon, and his mom Minnie Mae when needed. He charged Elvis $10 for a visit one evening when Elvis said he had trouble breathing deeply and pain in his chest. His blood pressure was high too. Dr. Clark gave him oxygen and told him to come to his office the next day for more tests. The next day, Elvis still felt some chest pain, but all the tests were normal. The doctor showed Elvis an X-ray and told him he was born with an extra rib on one side. Elvis joked about it, saying maybe that's how he'd find his future partner, like in the story of Adam and Eve. Having an extra rib is not common and is something a person is born with. It happens in about 1 out of every 500 people. One night, when Jerry Schilling was at Elvis's home, Graceland, Elvis asked Jerry to work for him. A few months before, Elvis had hired Larry Geller, who was a knowledgeable person about many religions and beliefs. Elvis was curious about why he was chosen to be Elvis Presley and thought Larry could help him find the answer. They talked a lot while Larry did Elvis's hair. Elvis started reading more books about spirituality, and his friends noticed the change. Some of his friends and even his manager, the Colonel, were worried because Elvis seemed distracted by his new interests. But Elvis was passionate about it and continued his spiritual studies. The Colonel thought that Larry Geller and some reading materials were making Elvis feel bad. Elvis was making a lot of silly movies with not-so-good music, and they were getting worse quickly. The Colonel wanted to make cheaper movies faster, which made Elvis feel like he wasn't being treated fairly and was being given poor material to work with. One producer, Hal Wallace, even admitted that he made Elvis movies to pay for other, more artistic films. Elvis was upset by this and would talk about it often. Even though the movies weren't doing as well, Elvis started earning $1 million for the first time with one of them called Harum Scarum. Elvis was able to support his family and friends with his money, but as an artist, he felt stuck with the studio's way of doing things. It made him very unhappy, and he couldn't be satisfied no matter how much money he was paid. Later, he said he cared about the quality of his movies, but it made him sick to his stomach. He felt like people in Hollywood didn't understand who he really was. Even Tom Petty, a fan of Elvis, wondered why Elvis let the same thing happen for so long. Elvis chose to be a provider for his family first and focused on his art second. That's why he stayed with his manager, the Colonel, and agreed to be in movies that made him feel bad. His family members asked him for money, and some people worked for him. His grandmother lived at his big house, Graceland, and his aunt moved in after her husband passed away in 1967. Elvis was very kind and helped his friends and their families with money when they needed it. He didn't expect them to pay him back. Elvis wanted to make sure he and the people around him didn't have to live in poverty like he did when he was young. Sometimes people tried to pressure him into doing things he didn't want to, like making a movie, by saying it could hurt his career. After Elvis passed away, the person who did this, called the Colonel, said he didn't really threaten Elvis. He just gave him the choice to say yes or no to the movie. Vernon, who was part of Elvis's family, didn't like to spend money because he was scared of losing it. Elvis, on the other hand, believed he could always earn more money. Elvis had a lot of people to take care of, and he enjoyed buying things and giving them away. His dad, Vernon, worried about money and asked Elvis to save it, fearing another big economic downturn like the Great Depression. Elvis would tell his dad, "It's just money, Daddy. I can always make more." Elvis worked for 23 years and had to earn more because he didn't get good advice about money. His dad, Vernon, was in charge of managing his money, but Vernon didn't know much about managing a lot of money and didn't listen to others' ideas. They were very private people and didn't trust others with their money or personal life. Even when someone suggested investing, Vernon would tell them to mind their own business. Elvis and his family kept their money and health problems secret, but in the end, they ran out of both. Elvis kept signing contracts with a man called the Colonel, and each time the Colonel got a bigger share of the money. They eventually agreed to split things 50-50. The Colonel was worried about his immigration status, so he told Elvis not to claim any deductions on his taxes. This meant Elvis paid a lot of taxes every year, even though he could have claimed some expenses. Elvis was okay with paying taxes, saying he was an American and wanted to support the country. Some people think the Colonel was the only one who could manage Elvis, but maybe someone else could have given him better financial advice. When Elvis was busy with movies, he found other things he enjoyed doing. He loved reading books and taking up hobbies. He would put a lot of effort into these things because he could. One day, he bought Priscilla a horse because she loved riding. Then, he got horses for everyone, including himself, Vernon, and his friends. But they needed a bigger place to keep all the horses. So they bought a big ranch in Mississippi called Circle G. This ranch had 160 acres and a big white cross in the middle, which Elvis thought was a sign from God. Elvis bought a ranch that he really liked, but it made his dad, Vernon, nervous because he had to borrow a lot of money for it. The ranch cost $437,000 back then, which would be worth $3.4 million today. Elvis also bought many pickup trucks for his friends and bought trailers for them to live on the ranch property with their families. He enjoyed spending money on the ranch and said it was the first time he had fun in a long time. He saw it as a hobby that he looked forward to every day. Elvis liked taking care of horses in the morning and going to Sears to buy things. It was fun for him and made him feel like an ordinary person. He enjoyed working too, like fixing fences or building things. The ranch made him feel normal. Elvis loved challenges, spending money, and being with the people he cared about. The ranch gave him all of that. He told his hairdresser, Larry, that the ranch was how he wanted to live his life. It was important for his health and peace of mind, and you can't buy that with money. A friend of Elvis, Ray Walker, said that Elvis was very happy when he bought a ranch called Circle G. If Elvis had managed his money better, the ranch could have been a nice place for him to relax and feel normal. Before and after owning the ranch, his bedroom at Graceland was his special place to rest. The ranch might have been a way for Elvis to remember the simple life he had in Tupelo before he became famous. Elvis really wanted some privacy, so he bought a ranch called Circle G. Fans still found their way there, just like they did at his home Graceland. He wanted this place to be a break from his busy life. He built a tall wall to keep people out, but fans found ways to see him. Despite this, Circle G was a peaceful place for Elvis. The kids of his friends from the Memphis Mafia remember having fun times there, like barbecues and playing with golf carts. It was like a mix of the TV show Green Acres and Graceland. When it was time for Elvis to go back to Hollywood to make a movie called Clambake, he didn't want to leave his home, Circle G, his horse son, and his girlfriend Scylla. He said no one could keep him away for long. Elvis tried to delay his departure because of soreness on his butt from riding, which also led him to meet Dr. Nick for the first time.